Hello and welcome to episode 41 of the Chills at Will podcast. I am honored and privileged to be joined by Ruben Degollado. Ruben Degollado was born in Indiana, but he's from Mcallen, Texas, where the majority of his family has lived for generations. He graduated with with a BA in English from the University of Texas Pan American and a master's in educational administration from Lewis and Clark College. He has been published in Bilingual Review / Revista Bilingüe, Beloit, Fiction Journal, Gulf Coast, Hayden's Ferry Review, Image, Relief, and the anthologies Texas Short Stories, Fantasmas, and Bearing the Mystery. He has been a finalist in American Short Fiction's annual contest, Glimmer Train's Family Matters contest, and Bellingham Review's Tobias Wolf Award. His debut novel, Throw, was published in 2019 and won the Texas Institute of Letters 2020 Award for Best Young Adult Book and was included on the Texas Library Association 2020, it's quite an acronym here, TAYSHAS or TAYSHAS, list of best books for teen readers, and was a Christianity Today 2020 Book of Merit. His recent work, has appeared or is forthcoming in the anthologies Dreaming of Me, Beyond Borders, and Naplanta Families. Ruben has been an educator since 1994, serving as a tutor, teacher, assistant principal, grant coordinator, and director of school improvement. He has been married to his wife, Julie, for over 20 years, and they live with their 3 children on a ranch in Texas. Ruben, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me. Excited.
Oh, so what a pleasure. And it's so awesome, as we were talking about, to see the cover of Throw in back of you there to your, I guess that'd be your right shoulder. So I saw that you won you were talking about the Tobias Wolf Award. This podcast, the name The Chills at Will, is actually based on a Tobias Wolf short story. So that is awesome to hear. Awesome to hear that. So you have so many of those, reviews where you've been published. We're of course going to talk about Throw, which is such a good book. We're going to talk about some of your forthcoming work in the anthologies. How did I do on the intros? Anything else you'd like to add?
No, that pretty much covers it. I think I need to shorten it up, if anything. Yeah.
No,
it's a work in progress.
No. So the book Throw, takes place in Texas, takes place in the Rio Grande Valley, right around Mcallen, where you grew up.
That's right.
I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about growing up in Mcallen. You talk about your family being there for generations. I assume that means like a big family, lots of cousins and uncles.
That's right.
I wonder about your language background, monolingual, bilingual, Spanglish. Yeah, a little bit about your background growing up there.
Right on. So I do come from a very big family. My on my paternal side, which I'm I'm second generation on that side.
Okay.
Citizen. I have 13. Originally had 13 uncles and aunts. A few have passed on, but on my dad's side, I have 13. And then I have over 50 cousins on that side of the family. And then on my mom's side, there were 7, so a bunch of cousins on that side. So growing up, I wasn't born in Mcallen. We originally, my parents, of course, were from the valley. My mom's from Hidalgo. My dad's from Mcallen. But we moved up north. They moved up north. That's where jobs were at the time. And growing up, as far as language goes, I don't consider myself fully bilingual. I wish I was. We grew up hearing Spanish and then responding in English a lot of the times. So although I have, I would say I have above average grasp of the language, I wouldn't say that I'm bilingual. I can write and write to the level I can write in English or anything like that. But I'm very comfortable with the language. It's something that is, you've read my work so far, and it's in there. But we are more. The word is called pocho, and when you say pocho, what you mean is somebody who is they kind of mix it up. A lot of times we also call it Tex-Mex, but that's where it's at. And for us, with as far as language goes, some some of the times the meaning of a word, the intent behind a word, you can say it in English, but the powerful intent that you may want to communicate, it only comes out in Spanish
Right.
sometimes. So that's a lot of the times, that's when I'm writing, I'm like, you know what, the English word just doesn't work here. I need the Spanish word, because there's so much connotation, there's so much meaning wrapped up, so much history in that specific word. I need to use that. So that's how I do it.
Right. You talk about growing up and speaking Spanish, or learning some of it, hearing it in Spanish, coming back in English. It's hard to raise a bilingual child, isn't it? I speak from experience. My wife is a native speaker. I'm a non-native, but I learned it. I teach it at the high school level. I speak pretty well. It's hard,
Yeah.
right? When
Yeah.
schools in English and TV for the most part. I mean, obviously there's TV in Spanish as well, but it is difficult. I wonder what being bilingual or close to it, wonder what that's done for you in your life, as far as specifically with your writing. You did talk about that, where you say, there are certain words that they got to be in Spanish. They don't quite have the same meaning. They're not translatable. I wonder how it's been to navigate those two languages. It's maybe kind of too big of a question, but
no, well, what's interesting though is if you read my work, you will notice that even though, like, my main narrative is in English, what I've noticed is that my word choice, my syntax, a lot of times reflects the fact that the characters speak Spanish, or are very familiar with it. So, and I can't think of any specific examples right now, but just one example that kind of is related to that. So when my characters have to go on a more extensive period of time talking, and it's understood that it's in Spanish. Well, I'm writing to English speaking readers, and some of them are monolingual. So what I do to do that is the characters don't use contractions. In English, spoken English, we use contractions all the time. But if you read sections where it's understood that it's in Spanish, but you're reading it in English, I don't use contractions, because it gives it that sense of Spanish. You know what I'm saying? So, like, we don't really, in Spanish, we don't really have the contractions that we have in English. So that's one of the ways that I honor spoken Spanish. And then the other thing, like I said, is just the syntax, the order of the words, some of the phrasing that people use. Even though it's in English, it's directly impacted by Spanish.
I appreciate that. That's a very specific thing that makes a lot of sense. I just, as of yesterday, teaching, in my Spanish 1 class, the idea of, it's not Ana's familia. That's what we're used to as English, right? Well, Ana's familia. We don't have, there's no apostrophe S in Spanish, right? La familia de Ana, that type of thing. And it's tough as a non-native speaker to pick that up. I would say that, Spanglish has got to be one of the 7 wonders of the world, right? I mean, I know other languages do it, but it's just amazing the smoothness that people are able to use it in, right?
Yeah.
And it definitely comes off in throw very well. I really enjoy that. I remember, some of Hemingway's work when he's in Spain or has a Spanish narrator, he'll say things like, very literal, like he calls himself, él se llama, right? He calls himself.
Yeah.
He has 15 years. Él tiene 15 años.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really cool how you were able to keep that structure, that format.
Yeah.
Right. So you talked about pocho, and I know, obviously it means different things in different countries even. I want to say that, like, the root of it is something like an unripe fruit, like where that word came from. Do you see that word in your life as having a negative connotation, or kind of more neutral?
It's not negative. I mean, it is. It does have some negative roots. So it's definitely something that could be used that way. I don't personally view it that way, but I think it's taken us time to get to that place, culturally speaking. Okay. To me, I use it with honor. When I say I'm pocho, it's meaning that I live in the hyphen. Is really where I'm at with that. So I'm in that hyphen between Mexican and American. I'm in the hyphen between the country that's to the south of me and the country that I live in right now in the north.
Yeah.
And so I personally use it with pride.
Mhm.
And then the other thing to consider with that is there's a phrase that we have is ni de aquí ni de allá. So meaning we're not from there, but we're not from here either. And so what's pretty cool about the region where I live is we're almost like a third country down here
Sure.
because
Yeah.
we live between the river and the checkpoint. So what a lot of people don't know is that if I want to go to Austin or San Antonio, I have to go through another border patrol checkpoint.
Wow.
And so to do that, it's very strange. It's almost almost like you're living in an alternate reality because you have to
Sure.
go through and you have to prove who you are again, even though you're in the United States. Within that 100-mile stretch between the two countries, like I said, it's almost like a third country here.
Wow.
So we have our own norms, we have our own language,
Yeah.
but also we understand that we're Americans, but we also understand that we have those roots in Mexico.
Wow. That what a metaphor for a writer like yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
That idea of being in between. Wow. Even having to go through another way station type of thing. Wow. I think it's a good transition into your reading as a kid. When you talk about Pocho, I think of the book Pocho, which is one of my favorites of all time. I'm assuming you've read that. Have you read that by Villarreal?
Yeah, Jose Antonio
Oh
Villarreal.
man,
Yeah, it's a great book.
right? I mean, I think the great literature is both universal and very specific. I know that someone who is a Pocho, someone between cultures, between whatever, would understand that, and it's so universal. I love that book so much. The narrator's father was a big shot in the Mexican Revolution, kind of the classic like tough guy. The son, the narrator, is more sensitive and a reader, and that type of thing. There's just so much going on there. So when you talk about like that third world, I remember him writing that in the book. It is of course fiction. It's not Jose's life, but just the idea that they don't speak English maybe 100% fully properly. They don't speak Spanish 100% properly. They had this in between. What a great book. What That book or other books, what really spoke to you as a kid, whether it was science fiction, sports books? What kind of stuff were you reading when you were younger?
I've always been a reader, um, but unfortunately, I never read any books up until I got to college that had people that talked like me or that looked
Mm.
like me, shared my cultural heritage.
Mm-hmm.
But as a kid, I read. I mean, I can remember very young reading Hardy Boys books. I remember, once I got and then once I got into like high school, like I really ramped it up, and so I would read. I read a lot of Vonnegut,
Mm.
uh, Tom Robinson. I read his work, Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, and I just remember my English teachers like, "What are you reading?" Like they were shocked that I was actually reading these books
Mm-hmm.
that were not not in the taught curriculum. They weren't
Sure.
required reading, I should say. So
Sure.
I read voraciously. I wrote really bad poetry. I always had a journal where I would write stuff down. But what really opened up for me was when I got to college, like I said, and I think the first book I probably read was by a Mexican American author was Sandra Cisneros,
Mm.
and it was her book Woman Hollering Creek. So that was the book that really wow opened up my eyes, because as I had been writing, none of the stuff that I wrote about in high school and before I discovered her was about culture. It was all pretty much
Mm-hmm.
the drama of being angsty teen,
Sure. Sure.
all that stuff. But I never really delved into the culture until I saw what could be done.
Hmm.
So I mean, we're talking. I'm 18 years old, 19 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and my eyes were just completely open.
I don't actually know the chronology. Did Woman of Holland Creek come before House on Mango Street? You happen to know?
I want to say it did. I could
Okay.
be wrong on that, but I
Okay.
want to say it did.
Okay.
I think it came out. I'm not even gonna guess, but probably 88, maybe
Okay.
somewhere around there. But I think it did.
I've never taught House on Mango Street. I've taught pieces of her work. I know it's taught like at my school in ninth grade right now, for example. I think I know that one better just because it's been taught in my department. But I remember reading, and the title is escaping right now, but I want to say it's the first story in Woman Hollering Creek. We read it in an education course, and it's the one where the girl is pretty much tricked by the I can see the name now, but he has an old name like an Aztec or Mayan name, and the story was just like wow. The story was wow. She has that one that I've taught for many years called 11.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember that, which is, how hard is that to write about being an 11-year-old?
Yeah.
But she just nails it. You talk about angst. The angst that comes with, her teacher blames her for her jacket. She can't find her sweater, and just one of those stories that seems so simple, but it's not. There's a lot to say about life in general. Who else? This podcast is called the Chills at Will podcast. It's about those lines that give you chills, those lines that you can quote, on demand. Besides Cisneros, I wonder who else has given you chills at will throughout your life with the reading.
And I'm terrible. I can't quote authors to save my life,
That's
but
okay. That's okay. It doesn't have to be literally that, but
I think when and I got to him very late, but the author that like I read his stories, and then I went out and bought all of his other books is Oscar Casadis.
Okay.
He wrote Brownsville, and when I read his stories, because I've read lots of Chicano authors over the years, Ana Castillo, Elena Maria Viramontes, all these authors. I've read them for years, but there was never, until I read Oscar Casares, I hadn't read an author that I could say, this person writes about a place that I understand very well. Like, and I'm not saying that I hadn't read that before, because there's other great authors, Renee Saldana writing young adult. But as far as the literary landscape of writing our stories here from the Rio Grande Valley, I had not found anybody that was as close to my work as I saw in him, right? So and he's way better. I'm not going to say that I'm at that level, but it just blew me away how he could write something that's very simple story about a boy working at a fireworks stand one summer, and you think it's going to be just a run of the mill, just slice of life story, and then bam, his endings are amazing. So you read his endings and you're like blown away.
Yeah.
So that's an author, and I'm yet to read his other books, but once I really discovered him, he was one of the authors I'm like, wow, this guy, he really knows what he's doing.
That's incredible. Now, do you happen to know the name of that story, the fireworks stand one?
I can't think of it right now. I could grab it off my shelf, but I cannot think of the name of it right now.
All right,
of course, because you're asking me, I can't think of it.
I'm going to check that out. Awesome. Thank you for that recommendation.
Yeah.
So as far as your writing goes, Throw came out in 2019. Obviously, you've been writing from way before that. We're going to kind of focus a little bit on La Selena Milagrosa and Throw. What were you writing before that? I know you've been published a lot of ways. I guess going back a little further, what made you say like, man, I can do this. I can be like Oscar Casadis. Did I say the name?
Casadis, yeah.
What maybe, I can be Sandra Cisneros. I can be these heroes. People are going to read my stuff. What kind of, what was that light bulb moment for you?
Well, in saying that, I need to give a shout out to literary magazines, college literary magazines, and and I'm talking the student run,
right?
A distribution of maybe 500 copies, because those folks are doing the work. And so I wrote I took a class and I wrote my first short story for my college university literary magazine. It was called Gallery. I went to University of Texas Pan American at the time, and I wrote a story, and it got, obviously they published it, and then I won second place. Nice. Right. Nice. So at that point for me, it was like, hey, I can do this. This is something I can do. And I think if I had not had that opportunity in getting in seeing my name in print, and for me it was like the world, this was my Paris Review. This
Right.
was my Glimmer Train. Seeing myself win an award, and I think I won like $20 at the time. It was a big deal to me, and so that's why I honor and I respect all the literary magazines that are out there. So I got my chops as a writer, as a literary writer. I know a lot of like YA authors, they jump right into it and they write a book, and that's not my story. So my story was, I got published there, and then I got published again from them, and then I started buying poets and writers. I started looking where I could get published elsewhere, and so I think the next big book or big journal I got in at the time was Bilingual Review. And so that was like my first foray into literary magazines, and then from then on, I just kept submitting, and I still do it now.
Yeah.
But on the side, because I do work on my books now. So yeah, that's where I got my start.
Do you still have a copy of that first story, or do you have a copy?
I
of that
do.
first?
It's on my shelf,
Nice.
and I look at it from time to time. I have a little section where all the journals I've been published in over the years, and that's like. And my biggest place of honor, of course, is that first story in Gallery magazine out of University of Texas Pan American.
That's so cool. And nothing like the hard copy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, online's great, but to have the hard copy is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I still prefer that. Like, I still prefer print journals. I don't really submit, and I know the cool thing and the innovative thing is to do web journals, and I respect them too because I read them. But I still like print journals. I'm old school that way.
Yeah. I wonder if that first story and your early writing was kind of thinly veiled memoir. Was it close to autobiography, or did you feel like you're writing about something kind of outside of yourself?
No, very early on, it was more autofiction for sure. I would say that, but it was always taking a real event. I mean, just what fiction writers do is you take a real event and you expand it, and you try to find meaning in that. You try to find a possible theme in that story, and so my first story was definitely and it was like a ranch story. It was about this young man that learns about the harshness of life, basically, and it was based off of my experience going out with my buddies hunting on their ranch.
Okay.
So that was the impetus for that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even with you coming on, the episode with me, I appreciate that so much. I see, like social media and stuff, you're very complimentary, helpful to other writers. I got to think it's kind of a pay it forward thing. I wonder who were some of the helpers, who helped you along the way, professors, whomever.
Yeah. So I have a very short list, to be frank with you. I didn't, people in academia, they have, you read their acknowledgments page and it's like 4 pages of names. I didn't have that experience. So a bunch of key people along the way for me. The person I always recognize and honor is Rene Saldana. He's a Valley boy just like me. We found each other, and he's been an encourager over the years. And so he was a huge champion of this book for a long time. And just encouraging, and I would send him stuff, and I had him over to my house when I was teaching in Oregon. I got some grant money to get an author, and so I invited him up. He was up there with us. He did readings with the kids, and what I learned from him is just how to just encourage people. Like you mentioned that I like to pay it forward, and that's definitely what I do. And more recently, I've once this book was published, definitely there's been a lot of supportive people. And what I've learned is you have to support authors regardless of how you feel you're being supported, if that makes sense. And the reason I say that is A lot of times it can be a very isolating experience. There are some authors that think, I'm in competition with you, when in reality we're only in competition with ourselves.
Right.
And so I really try to push the work of others as much as I can, and more than my own, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. So I wonder about the schedule of being a writer, especially in pandemic times, 2021. You have I would say 9 to 5. You have an 8 to 3 or 8 to 5 or whatever it is, right? Where you work at the schools. How do you find time to write? Are you the type who says, "Hey, I'm going to knock out, an hour and a half, 3 hours, or 100 words or 500 words"? How does that work as far as having a schedule?
For me, I don't have a set schedule. I have recently, because I've been on some deadlines, but mainly I'll I'll try to get up in the morning, and I'll do like 30 minutes. I'll either read what I wrote the day before, or I'll plug away at it. And then, what's helped me in this pandemic, if there's any positive to be found, is I used to have an hour commute. So I would, travel an hour in the morning, hour in the afternoon, so 2 hour commute total. And so what I try to do now is, like, if I'm off the clock at 4:30, I close one laptop and I open the other, and so I spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe an hour on the weekdays. Not every day, of course, but on the weekdays I try to do that. And then Saturdays for me is my writing day. I try to get up early.
Yeah.
I try to knock out 2-3 hours in front of the computer, working on whatever project I have at the time.
Okay. I'd love to get into the Selena piece. I don't know. So that correct me if I'm wrong, that's going to be published in the upcoming anthology?
That's been published. That is published in the anthology that's dedicated to Selena, called Dreaming. It's out by Flower Song Press.
Okay, and it's come out fairly recently then?
Yeah, I want to say it came out maybe 2 months ago. So that piece already came out.
Not that far off. Okay.
It is part of a larger work of mine. But yeah, that one came out on its own.
Yeah. I wonder if you can maybe give a little intro as far as what Selena means to you, means to the people of the RGV. And also, I thought it was so cool how you have characters that correspond. You have like Marisol, for example. She's not a huge character in Throw, but she is there. I think maybe only in the epilogue. And her kids, etc. And then she becomes a character in the Selena piece.
Yeah.
So I wonder about the decision to kind of combine those two worlds, and then maybe if you want to talk a little bit about the background on the Selena piece.
Okay. So the Marisol is in the story, and you see her in Throw, and that's very deliberate on my part. So I mentioned that I come from a big family. Well, I write about a big family, and they're not, the Degollados by any stretch, but all the stuff that I write, it's related to the family Izquierdo. And so, Marisol is a main character in this Selena story. And then she's a minor character in Throw.
Right.
And so all of my fiction up to this point, my published fiction anyway, it deals with this one family. And so there's lots of uncles and aunts, there's, lots of cousins. And so it's all interrelated. It's all in the same universe. And so my second book that's going to be published hasn't, I can't announce where and when, but I have a second book, The Family Izquierdo.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It deals with the dynamic of the grandfather that you see at the end of Throw. So Papa Tavo, the grandfather, he's the core of the narrative.
Right.
And you see Cirilo in the book, you see Marisol, all of the uncles and aunts, and yet there are some references to Throw in that. So it's not a sequel, but it's kind of an expansion of that fictional universe that I've created.
Okay.
And then your second question, you had a follow-up to that was,
I guess, just wondering about, why Selena? Why did you write about her? What's her importance?
It was actually based on, so I get story ideas from everywhere. And I read a Mexican tabloid. I can't remember the tabloid it was, but it was like the title was La música de Selena cura a todos, or something like that. It was Selena's music heals everyone, or something of that nature. And so it was, it was kind of a Weekly World News type of tabloid. And it basically said that this woman was healed by listening to Selena's music. And then I thought, aha, so there's a story there. And then
what a great writer's prompt, huh?
It was awesome. I was like, man, they just handed that to me. So I kept that tabloid, and I think it was published in like 97 or something like that. So I kept it. And, I always, when I see stuff like that, I hold on to it because I know there's a good story in there. And so then I had this character of Marisol. And I thought, what, she'd be a good candidate for telling this story about Selena. And so that's where the story came from, is based off of a tabloid, but also based on this character. And so for like us in the Valley, we have mixed feelings about Selena, I think. Okay. She's not universally loved. That sounds kind of, I don't know, like I'm being dramatic, or she's also, but when she was popular, and then when she passed on, it was huge. It was huge to us because, I mean, even though she's not from the Valley, she's from Corpus, and Corpus is its own thing, north of us. She was someone that we could point to, that basically crossed over, and she was on the verge of becoming even more famous before she was murdered.
Sure.
And for us, I remember finding out, and it was like, for a lot of people, it was like hearing that the president had been shot. It was a big deal. Other people in the other parts of the country, oh yeah, maybe it was just a headline. Sure. But for a lot of people here, it was very serious. You would see people crying. You would see people, doing vigils and all kinds of things. So yeah, it was huge. It was huge for us. And I wanted to capture just the honor that people put into that, but also in that story, kind of taking it a step further. And you have this woman, Lourdes, who actually wants to, her to become a saint. Yeah. And so that just taking it a little bit, it's a little absurd almost, but people did love her, almost to that level for sure.
Yeah. Well, a great name to pick with Lourdes, right? From the apparitions, etc. And I liked how you talked about how Marisol kept saying, I know she's a Jehovah's Witness, but, in the letter, I know she's a Jehovah's Witness, but I still think she should be. So that was pretty good. So yeah, I don't know if you would be willing and ready to read that and to give any intro you need to. I think you kind of already did in any piece of this. So this is again La Milagrosa Selena.
Yeah.
And this is in the anthology called Dreaming. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
And yeah, no problem here on time. It's not
okay. So let me try to find it. I have it up here.
No problem. No rush.
Okay. So that's the setup. The story is, again, it's about it's almost a petition.
Sure.
My narrator, Lourdes Montelongo Sepulveda, is writing a letter to the Archbishop of Brownsville.
Okay.
And it's right around the same time that, a couple of years after she's passed on. And there's the setup is her friend has an eating disorder, and it's not like usual eating disorders. She eats, she wakes up and she sleepwalks, and she basically eats a lot. She binges, and doesn't, wakes up in the morning and really can't explain what's happening, and it's started to affect her health. And what happens is that they play the music of Selena, and she's healed by her music as she's doing that. Okay, so this section here is towards the end. Let me just pick up that section here. So she's been healed, right? And what's that question here is that another main character in my stories you see is Victoria. So there's this Victoria is like this Pentecostal. She's charismatic, and of course Lourdes is very Catholic. So in Lourdes's mind, the healing has occurred because of Selena's music, and in Victoria's mind, which you don't really hear from directly, it's because she prayed with her and she anointed her with oil. So I'm contrasting the old world of Catholicism and the newer world of charismatic Christianity. So it says here, and again, the narrator's Lourdes. She says, my comadre Marisol is even more beautiful now that she's lost a little weight. It's not the weight really, it's what she thinks about herself that is changing her whole face, making her even prettier than she was when she was a teenager. Lalo is the only one who doesn't seem to notice how much prettier she's become. To him, she is the same gorgeous woman she always was. So you see, Padre Peña, La Milagrosa Selena, yes, that will be her new name, performed a miracle on my comadre Marisol and continues to do so every night. She took a woman who was trapped in sadness and freed her. I know it is a miracle since La Milagrosa Selena spoke to both comadre Marisol and me, and I myself saw my comadre healed. I hope you believe in the miracles of Selena and do everything you can to make sure La Milagrosa Selena becomes a saint. If you do not believe me or think Selena is outside of grace because she was a testigo de Jehová, don't worry, because God will forgive your blindness to the truth of what my comadre Marisol, Victoria, and I witnessed. He is good that way to forgive us no matter what. If you do believe, but do not help me in my efforts to make La Milagrosa Selena an official saint because you are afraid of what people will think, I will not hold it against you. You have to do what you have to do. However, un aviso, I tell you this. When people hear of these miracles and you don't recognize them as miracles, they will still believe. For miles and miles, they will hear this story, and La Milagrosa Selena and her music will heal them too. At yerberias, en tiendas botánicas, and grocery stores all over the valley, and wherever there are Mexicans, Selena's candles will be next to Jesus and Mary's, the 7 African powers, and El Niño Fidencio Constantinos. All you will be able to do is ignore what is happening. Whatever you decide to do, gracias for listening. God bless.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yeah, I loved how Lourdes she's obviously so passionate about, the canonization, but she's also like, if it doesn't happen, it's okay. You're forgiven. She's still going to be a legend, She's still going to have that incredible legacy. And it really reminds me, I don't know if you talk about some of the translations not being perfect. I always felt like it was kind of a bad translation, but Gabriel Garcia Marquez has a short story called, in English, it's something like The Handsomest Drowned Man in the World.
Yeah. I read that a long time ago. I can't really remember that, but I know.
Your story reminded me of that in a really cool, positive way where, it was about this man who died and they never met him. And so because of that, they were able to kind of idealize him, right? And the ending is similar to yours in that it's like, the legend will grow, right? People are going to remember Selena. I love how you tick off, the botanicas, this, that, all the specific places. Like her fame is not going to be bottled up. It's going to grow, and people will remember. And so it's kind of like, hey, Padre Peña, like get on the train, right?
Yeah.
Like it's going to happen. She's going to become a legend. Like, you should become part of this too. So.
Yeah, she's telling them basically, you need to get out in front of this because if you don't, it's going to happen regardless of what you think. She says, un aviso, I tell you this. Like she's letting him know.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that, getting ahead of it. She's kind of like not cocky about it, but like, like almost inviting him in when you almost feel like it'd be the other way around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. Was that a piece that was like you wrote in a day? Is that a piece that took you a long time?
It took me.
It's part of it.
It took me like the first draft. That one really just boom, boom, boom. That
nice.
Other than all the edits and stuff, it was a really quick story to write. It was
Nice.
a longer story to place because it's very specific. And then, you know, I sent it out a few times and I got rejected. And then I saw that they were doing a Selena anthology. I'm like, whoa, like the timing,
Nice.
it was meant
Yes.
for this book. So
Yes.
definitely there. And then like as far as one of the things that I think I like to do is you'll never hear unless Ludidus is telling the story, you won't hear that voice again.
Hmm.
I like to make very unique first person narrators.
Right.
So you'll read his voice, you know, of course he's a teenage boy, and then you hear that Lourdes, which, you know, she's presumably close to middle age, somewhere in there. And so once I have a narrator's voice, it's really easy to write the story. I just have to discover that.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. One more question about Selena, and this is very controversial. You can choose not to answer it. Did you see the miniseries? How was it? The Netflix one. you can plead the fifth if you like.
Oh, I was just talking about that yesterday when I was interviewed by somebody else yesterday. Yeah, I've seen it, and so I will say this first of all. I want to preface everything with this: I love that they're making Mexican American content.
Right.
I think that's awesome. You know, we're in the forefront. So, you know, Netflix is doing an awesome job of putting shows like that out there. And there was the other one about the taqueria. I can't remember that one. That was a good show as well. But I will say this is that to me, it's obvious that people that worked on the show were from California. Not to denigrate our California,
sure,
California friends or brothers and sisters over there. But we all, like in the Valley, we cracked up. There's a very specific scene where they're driving and you see the Brownsville sign, which, you know, they're driving to Brownsville, and you see the road sign there. They're in the van, and in the background, there's all these mountains. And so we laugh at that in the Valley, because in the Valley, the biggest mountain that we have is basically the trash heap. That's
right.
there's not a single hill, mountain, nothing. Like it is flat as flat. And so we saw that, and all of us, you know, everybody I knew were just cracking up and roasting that. And you know, I understand it's you have to do settings and stuff like that, but the other thing too, though, is the nuances of the language, the gestures. It for somebody from the Valley, it's not quite there, you know, because we have our own gestures, our own mannerisms.
Sure.
Like when somebody tells us something that we don't believe, you know, we'll go like that. You know, we have this way of doing it. Or if we disapprove, we suck our teeth. You know, we click our tongue like that. So you didn't see a lot of that. I think they really, if they had just had somebody that was from the Valley as a guest, as an observer, as a, you know, maybe working on the mannerisms and some of the language, I think it would have felt more authentic. But I love the show. So I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna trash any casting choices. I'm not about that. But I just think that a little piece was missing for the people that you know, who live around here, that understood and grew up with those stories. It didn't feel as authentic as I had wanted it to be.
Fair enough. A small point, but I always felt like the sucking teeth, whenever I've read that, has been forced and didn't fit. And I thought you pulled that off really well in Throw. You know, I never thought that it really made sense, but in yours it did. It, like you said, the gestures at the right times. It went with the tone of what, you know, so and so was saying, and so I really appreciated that. You know, so the last thing about Selena is that obviously, like we talk about her being a legend, right? I mean, it would have almost been impossible to make everyone happy, right? I mean, there's such a high bar that they had to reach, and so like you said, that's great that the content is out there.
But people were not, I'm going to say this, people were not nice. A lot of people went off, and you know, like what got me the most was the casting choices when they were, you know, she doesn't look like her, and you know,
Yeah.
denigrating her and all that. I wasn't okay with that. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think, again, I appreciate and love that they're putting that out there
Mm-hmm.
for people, because you know what? People would not have heard, a lot of people wouldn't have heard of Selena
Yeah, that's
otherwise.
true. That's right.
But just to me, it's just a matter of the authenticity.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Throw. Throw's recent. Throw is 2019. It is a heck of a book. It in many ways doesn't fit into genres. We'll maybe talk about that in a minute. What was the background on Throw? Where did the idea or ideas come from? What was the process in getting that book from your head and into a published into a bookstore, basically?
Yeah. So I mentioned before that I write in this fictional universe,
Mm-hmm.
and the main character Cirilo, he's called Wedo in the book. He had actually appeared in a short story that was published by Image,
Okay.
and then I started exploring this character, and I started to write a short story with his voice. And what happened was, the short story was 10 pages, and then it was 20, and then it was 25, and it kept going. And I found, wait a second, I think I have a novel here, because this young man has a story to tell, this narrator. And so how that worked out was one summer, um, I when I was a teacher, I just started writing the story, and then, like I said, it became a novel. And during the summer in Oregon, I basically went to a coffee shop every day. I got there at 8 o'clock in the morning. I left at 12 or 1,
Nice.
and I treated it like a job. And by the end of the summer, I had a first draft of this novel. And so the main character, of Cirilo, visually and his personality, it's a composite of two kids I've known before. The main character of Llorona, or Karina, the love interest, who's peeking at us behind me there, in that poster, is she's also a composite. Visually, she looks like one student I had, and then her personality's from another student. And so I guess what I found was my kids would always like The Outsiders.
Yes.
Students love that book year after year. It's dated, of course, but they like the book. And one of the things that I found was, like, I would like to tell a story about, troubled kids like you see in The Outsiders, but in a Chicano context. And so that's kind of how I envisioned this novel here. And so the other thing that was important to me was the spiritual aspects of it, the folklore aspects of it, because that's a huge part of who we are here in the Rio Grande Valley. So I wanted to make sure that those pieces were in there as well. So that I came up with this book, which, with my publisher didn't initially see it as a YA book. But then we sat down in Seattle. We were sitting down together, and we just had a conversation. He's like, "Hey, is this YA?" And I'm like, "Well, it has a young adult narrator,
Sure.
but it's not like any YA I've ever read. I've seen some stuff sort of similar, but to get down to the level of writing about gangs in the 90s in Texas, I'd never read anything like that. So, well, we'll just see." So we looked at it, and we kind of explored the market. So we published it as YA.
It's really interesting that you talk about, like, Cerito / Wedo is a composite of two people, and same with Llorona, Karina, because he's such an interesting character, the narrator, in that he's between generations. He's a mix of mom and dad. I think he literally has different colored eyes. No?
Well, he's got they're basically like my eyes. He's got green and brown in them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The bilingual lifestyle you talk about. I think towards the beginning you described very well the different neighborhoods and even the cities and their own neighborhoods, and just all kinds of contradictions. He's a reader. He's a writer. He's kind of an aesthete, if I'm saying the word correctly, but he's also involved with with gangbangers or gang members, right? He he doesn't live in the neighborhood necessarily. He lives like in a ranch, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of, dipping in and out. And it's so interesting. I thought it was so well written how so many parts of the book you have him, he pictures the future, but without the people he's with in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just so interesting to me. And this idea of he's kind of like, he's a dreamer, but he's also really realistic,
Yeah.
Um, so two of his buddies are Smiley and Angel, right? And Smiley is absolutely lovable. He's kind of like the runt of the group, right? He's even when he's talking tough, everyone's like, yeah, whatever. Smiley, okay, right? And then is it Angel or Angel?
Angel, yeah.
Right. I mean, and then Angel is, a tough guy. He's physically strong. He's kind of, talks quietly as if, everything is like a secret. Everything's really important. And so it's really cool how you set up that yin and yang of the brothers there too. You mix in the Spanglish. You talk about in one part, you say Angel could mess you up, gacho.
Yeah.
Right. You've got some of the more minor characters who are very well done. Rigo, I want to say, right? Rigo's the one who always gets clowned on because he doesn't speak any Spanish.
Yeah.
Is Rigo, does he have an analog? Is he somebody that you think of growing up?
Well, I think what I was trying to accomplish with Rigoberto was that we in our own culture, wrongly so, we find ways to identify the other in someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so Rigo was ostensibly he looks more Mexican than Güero does, right? He's darker than him, but yet he can't speak Spanish. And so what I was trying to get at with Rigo and Rigo and Cirilo are almost like foils of each other.
Yeah.
In that Rigo wants to be in the gang, he wants to show himself, he wants to fight. Cirilo doesn't really care about those things. What he wants out of the gang is the camaraderie, the family, right? That's the important things to him. But yet, when you look at both of these characters, there's an otherness there in both of them, but for different reasons, right? And so that's kind of what I was going for with the characters there. But so I don't have a direct connection, but there's always been when we go into a space, when if I go into a space where there's other Mexican Americans, there is this like, man, he speaks really good Spanish. Like I wish I could speak Spanish like that guy, or that girl. And so we go into a space, and there's almost like we sometimes can be made to feel like we don't belong, that we're not Hispanic enough, we're not Mexican American enough. And so that's what I was trying to capture with that. And then going back to the character of Cirilo, he's an outlier, like you said. He's in between worlds. I mean, definitely he's living in multiple hyphens.
Yes.
In his life, he's middle class, but yet all of his friends aren't. His dad owns a business. He's somewhat affluent, of course, and yet he's apart, right? So you do have this dichotomy of this young man, and I think for a lot of us as teenagers, there's always jumping off points where we're gonna be this person or we're gonna be that person, right? So we have these multiple decision points in high school. Where we're going to be in one crew or another, or one identity or another. So I was trying to, capture that as well.
Yeah, you even if they're quote unquote minor characters, they're so well done. I mean, Brenda is the kind of loud and welcoming and friendly, friend of them, and she seems like she's very well off, if maybe even rich, you might say. But going back to The Outsiders, it reminds me of I guess Cherry Valance saying things like, kind of like everyone's got problems, right? If you're rich, you're poor, right? So there's a lot there that everyone can relate to. And there was one other connection I wanted to make. I think I'll come back to it in a second. I've forgotten it, but yeah, the characters are very well done. And that's what it was. Going back to Selena, right? When you talk about the idea of the hyphen, wasn't it the father in the movie who said, we have to be more Mexican than the Mexicans, more American than the Americans?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
right?
it's true.
So there's Rigo and Angel, right? So then, of course, there's Karina, who is La Llorona, the title character. Well, not the title character, but the cover character. there's a piece here that I'm going to read, just a short piece about her. Llorona was no harmless little pigeon. She was the lechuza, the owl you'd see just before someone is about to die, the one that haunts you in your dreams and you never want to see in real life because it means you're about to lose someone you love. Right? So there's a good, intro to her, kind of some foreshadowing, right? Can you speak a little bit about how you created that character? Because we'll hopefully avoid some plot spoilers, but she is such an interesting character, and she is a dynamic character. There's some change in her, but kind of how you came up with that character.
With her, she's interesting because she's also, so Cirilo is in, like we said, he's got a foot in two different worlds,
Mm-hmm.
and so does she, but hers are different. Her feet is kind of like the cover. She has her dichotomy is she's got one foot in this spirit world,
Mm-hmm.
right? That Cirilo mentions, that she sees things that no one else can see. She hears things, and she's got her other foot in the real world with the gangs, with the Hispanics causing panic gang.
Mm-hmm.
And so that character, what I thought about with her was, okay, so if our folklore, if our heritage stories are very important to us, and La Llorona is one of them, the legend of La Llorona is a big one. How do I put this into a real context?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what I did was I thought about this young lady, and I've always been fascinated with that legend, but I thought about this young lady that adopts that persona of La Llorona. She drops the law. She becomes Llorona, and she does it for a very real reason, which I won't give away.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm expanding right now on my current project.
Ah.
But she has a foot in one world, and she has the foot in the other. But then the legend, of course, is that this person is supposed to be, La Llorona is supposed to be irredeemable,
Mm.
because of the what she's done in drowning her children in the river.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, you know what, I don't believe that. I don't believe any person is irredeemable. So I wanted to write a character that adopted the persona of somebody that you say, you know what they did was too bad. There's no forgiveness for them. There's no redemption.
Right.
And so I put that into her, and I won't give too much away, but she does find her redemption, and she does find that. And so that's kind of the story I wanted to tell with her. Is that, again, she's got a foot in both worlds, just like he does, but it's different for her.
Yeah, you do such a good job at avoiding stereotypes. Angel, for example, he's got a lot of redeeming qualities. Even though outside society I might not see that. Llorona too. Some of the students at the school basically are like, oh, she's like a devil type, and
Mm-hmm.
she's got so much in her. And you have a very soft touch with with a lot of the trauma that she's gone through, that a lot of them have gone through, and
Mm-hmm.
you really give a voice to the teenagers. It's not preaching, it's not writing down to young readers. It's very, very believable, I think. Both of us are maybe a year or two past our teenage years, but uh, I think you did a really good job with that. And I can't wait. I'm only teaching Spanish this year. I'm not teaching English, but I know we'll get back to it year or two. And I love to put this book into my curriculum.
Thanks. I'd love to see it there. And I think, as far as YA goes, I think a lot of YA books, our teens are more complex than we think. They think they have deeper, more complex things
Right.
going on in their brains. Social observations that Cirilo makes.
Mm-hmm.
These big ideas that they'll talk about something that's very banal and basic, and then they'll hit you with something very profound, which is what
Right.
Cirilo does. He's talking about lowriders, and all of a sudden there's this observation about life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, going back to what I was originally saying, there was a lot of the YA novels don't do that.
No.
There's a lot of good ones out there that do, but some of them out there, they just kind of, I think they trivialize what teens go through, and the thought processes that they have, and that in some ways don't honor them. So I wanted to write something that, these kids, they're complex thinkers, they're critical thinkers, they have a lot going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And despite, if they're in a gang, they may be the most astute social observers that you have.
Yeah, I mean, so many good lines, so many chill-inducing lines. Profound. You talk about one of the lines. I guess this would have been from Cirilo, from Güero. He says, "Names are like blood, giving us life and pride, telling us who we are. I now had two, one from each of my families." Right? Llorona and Güero, they're kind of back and forth in their relationship. I mean, and she says, she basically kind of pushes him away and says, "Well, excuse me, this is a flashback when she originally pushed him away and kind of embarrassed him."
Hmm.
Down the road, she says, "Well, I was trying to save you from me. You're the only good I've ever known." And like anyone who's been a teacher, we know that we know those kids who have that sense of hopelessness,
Yeah.
who feel like none of this matters, I'm not worth it. And it's obviously incredibly sad. It can be
Yeah.
changed, but when they're that young and say that, it's like, oh man,
Yeah.
right? I really enjoyed the character of Benny, who was, the reformed, he was in prison for a while. He comes out. He's quoting scripture. He's like a father figure to them, right? And he's like a cautionary tale.
Hmm.
I wonder where Benny came from.
Benny, let's see. When I wrote Benny, I think he came from a kind of a pastiche of people I knew in prison ministry at the time.
Mm,
Um, and then I think he also came from I remember going to like the gym, and I remember seeing this guy, and this was like in Mission in the 90s, and there was this dude was huge. I mean, he was like really big, and lifting like 3 plates, 45 plates on 45-pound plates on each side. And I
right.
thought, man, that's my Benny right there. I looked at him and I'm like, that's the guy. He had the prison tats everywhere. He was a tough guy. He was walking around in a tank top and really long shorts, and the white socks pulled up really high, but he was lifting heavy. And so visually, that's where I pictured this guy coming from. But the attitude of just the paternal care that he gives the kids. I mean, that's just a lot of the men I've seen and been around growing up, where they don't, they've had bad lives, they've made mistakes, they don't want to see it happen for the
Sure.
kids around them. And that's
Sure.
Benny's heart. He doesn't want to see his kids, the kids that come into his store going down the same route.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing with Benny is, he's got his certain rules in his store. He manages the store, but yet he has a lot of grace with the kids.
Right.
In a typical YA book, a lot of time that's the teacher and he's the guide, and or she's the guide. Hey, you should get into this writing contest or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And Benny's, I guess, role in somewhat, he's somewhat of a guide to them, but his role is really just to love the kids and to speak life and truth into their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even, about the way that like a kid would join a gang or be associated with a gang and all that is I got to think very realistic. And even Angel has reasons to be hopeless about life. I mean, he lost his father, he and Smiley. But even like I was really struck by him basically telling Güero, basically saying, "Hey, this is not for you." Right? With that handshake kind of towards the end, like this lifestyle is not for you. And it makes you sad where it's like where Angel or Angel is saying it's kind of like it's good enough for me, or it's kind of what I got, but you're better than that.
Yeah.
I thought that was really well done too.
Yeah, to me, that's one of the most heartbreaking
Oh
scenes in
yeah.
the book.
Oh, no doubt.
It breaks my heart, and I like to think that Angel is still out there,
Hmm.
that maybe he did his time, but I like to think that
Yeah.
he's Benny now. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like
Right.
that's a possible future for Angel, and that's where I like to see him at.
Oh, totally.
Because I read that scene, it gets me every time
Yeah.
he literally pushes him away, and he tells him that he's
Hmm.
like, this basically was all I was going to have,
Yes.
but it's not for you.
Yes, exactly. I wonder if you could finish by reading a piece of Thoreau.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I won't tell you where in the book this is
Okay.
because it matters. But this is, I mentioned I think at the very beginning, this is the expanded family, the Izquierdo family. My second book is The Family Izquierdo. And this is Cirilo is visiting his grandfather in the nursing home. His grandfather is, he never uses the word, but he's, he has dementia, basically. And he's there with his father, his aunt Victoria, and his little cousin. And so his grandfather has just had a moment of clarity. All right, and so here we go. Tío told little Gonzalo to give Papa Tavo his saludo. Salúdale, mijo. Go say hi to your grandfather. Little Gonzalo reached forward and picked up Papa Tavo's hand, not scared like my other little cousins were, who acted bored and tried to hide it, and then not even walk into Papa Tavo's room. Tia Victoria was a home health nurse, and she sometimes took little Gonzalo on her visits because the old people liked him. He was never scared of them, like most kids, so they would always ask Tia Victoria about him and give him little strawberry candies whenever he came by. I didn't know if he wasn't scared because he had seen so many old people sick in their beds, or because that was just the way he was. Little Gonzalo turned Papa Tavo's hand over and over and looked at all the wrinkles, the bruised veins, and the brown liver spots. He said, "Abuelito, what's all this?" We all kind of laughed at how little Gonzalo didn't care what he said, at how he was the only one who talked to Papa Tavo that way. I thought all that about him being a chillon mama's boy didn't matter, because little Gonzalo was brave in his own way, in a way none of the rest of us were or ever would be. It was quiet, and none of us knew what to say. Then, after a little while, Papa Tavo looked down at little Gonzalo, and he actually smiled. I couldn't understand him real good, because whenever he did talk, it sounded like he was half asleep, like he had glass marbles in his mouth or something. It sounded like he said, "Esto, mi nieto, es un mapa donde he andado, donde he vivido." This, my grandson, is a map of where I've been, a map of where I've lived. I looked down, and I knew what he meant about his hands. On his hands, I could read where Papa Tavo had been. The large spots were places he had stayed. The smaller ones, the places he had visited. Every wrinkle, a dusty sendero he had taken to get him here across the river. Every vein, a street he had used to get him to work. The clear spaces in between, where he had never been and never would go. I turned my own hands over and held them out. The map was mostly clear with large open spaces I would claim for the izquierdos, clear with undiscovered trails and roads I would map out for Papa Tavo and the rest of us. Along the way, I would meet others and tell them about what I had seen and what I knew. I would begin by telling them about the summer between the sophomore and junior years of my life, starting my personal narrative, my story, with me sitting on the porch waiting for Angel and Smiley, thinking about what it meant to be alone. Then I would tell them the rest, about how even when you are alone or lose someone, you can find hope, even if it is in the smallest of things: a tiny black cross, a book of poems, a goodbye that might not really be a goodbye from a girl who taught you how to love.
I'm not physically able to snap, but I would snap if I could. I literally cannot do that. I started the podcast to highlight those type of lines, that chill inducing, the very emotional, beautifully done. Thank you for reading that part. I'm so glad you were able to read that particular part. Wow. So good. I just love the idea of him being 17, but also realizing, kind of looking back, but also realizing there's so much more ahead.
Yeah.
The physically looking at his hands in comparison to his aged grandfather, who, like you said, has dementia. Beautifully done. And for those who are listening to this, that's a 12 out of 10. But when you read it in context, when you read it, after and before other things, it's even better. So beautifully done. Thanks for reading that.
You're welcome.
That was
Thank you
awesome.
for letting me read it.
I think you've dropped a couple hints. So your future projects, you've got the Family Izquierdo.
Yeah. So I got two things. One of them is I got a book that's coming out for sure, The Family Izquierdo. It's an adult literary novel.
Okay.
And it expands this world, and it's not a continuation, not a sequel. to throw, but it has the same characters. It's in the same time frame. So that's again, literary adult. The other book I'm working on right now is a sequel. So the book that I'm working on, it's tentative. I won't give you the title, but it's a book that takes off and expands what happens. It's kind of a prequel sequel to this book here, and it deals with the main character of Karina and her story.
Oh man, I can't wait for that one, because you leave some questions open, not in an annoying way, but in a way that really makes you want more. So it's Throw is perfectly made for a sequel.
Yeah.
And
So
like
that's
you
what
said,
I'm doing.
Like you said, I look forward to a lot of the pre stuff as well.
Yeah. So there's definitely this, that something went down before this book even came into play. And so that's what I'm trying to capture, what happened before with her. And then this book is kind of sandwiched between what happens after.
I wonder if you saw Throw and the second one together way back, or if it was Throw and then it was like, oh wait, I can do it. I can do it. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's been planned, and at one point, I'm not going to tell you the real title, but at one point in my head, I was like, the next one's going to be Down. That's the title, is Down, Throw Down, but or Throw Again. Maybe I'll do that, but no, it's got a different title than that.
Oh man, what a pleasure! Thanks again for writing such a great book. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to be I can never pronounce the word. I'm going to be an evangelist for the book, sharing it as much as I can. I really hope that I get to a point with teaching the right class and stuff where I can teach it in my class, because it's a great one. And it lets students know, like, hey, people have written great books since 1970,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, let's read some modern classics, and that really is such a great book. So looking forward to talking about that book with others, and also reading the second one, as well as the Family Izquierdo, the adult form. So thank you so much. I know you said Saturday is your work day, and I appreciate you carving out a little time for me. And thank you so much. Great luck with your continued writing.
Okay. Thanks for having me on, and continued success with your podcast, getting great authors on here.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening to episode 41 with Ruben Degollado. You can now subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Please leave me a 5-star review. You can also ask for the podcast by name using Alexa, and find it on Spotify and on Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram, where I'm at Chills at Will Podcast, or on Twitter, where I'm at Chills at Will PO1. This is a passion project of mine, a DIY operation, and I'd love for your help in promoting what I'm convinced is a unique and spirited look at an often ignored art form. The intro song for the Chills at Will podcast is Wind Down instrumental version. And the other song played on this episode was Hoops instrumental by Matt Weidauer, with both songs being used through archesaudio.com. For now, thanks again for listening, and I hope that these quarantine days bring you texts like Throw by writers with mad skills like Ruben Degollado, whose work gives you chills at will.